The rules of society that I've been living by had left me feeling very far from fulfilled and satisfied. And if anything, had left me feeling completely sick and drained. So if I wanted to live my best life, I would have to let go of a lot of what I knew. And I took that choice. So my relationship ended, I left my job, and I left my home.
Tell us a bit more about that actual point where you decided enough is enough.
On those days, how did you find compassion? Well, quite frankly, some days I didn't.
Is that the kind of man I even want to be? The kind of man that feels? Because what does that look like?
The moment that you make the jump and you have this trust fall with life, it's scary. I woke up in panic a lot of times. Okay, what am I doing with my life?
Today, I'm beyond excited to introduce a very special guest, Anelia Uzanova. When I first heard her story, the words that came to mind were courage, compassion, and consciousness. Anelia's journey is one that deeply resonated with me, not just because of her incredible shift from a successful pharma career to finding her purpose as a coach, but because of the bold transformation she embraced along the way. She didn't just find herself. She realigned her life with the truest version of who she is. Anelia, I know our listeners will be as inspired by your journey as I've been. Let's dive in. So where did it all begin for you?
I'm a little bit blown away by that introduction. It's so beautiful. Thank you. So my name is Anelia, born in Bulgaria. I grew up in the US until the age of 13, and then we moved to Switzerland again for my parents' work, where I did the rest of my education before moving away and studying, doing my undergrad in economics and politics in the UK, and then moving back to Switzerland, which has been my base for quite a while, to start my corporate career. And I think it's important to mention that it's a very typical INSEAD background, right? I feel Bulgarian in many ways, even though I haven't lived in the country for a very long time, but something always tied me back to my roots. And as we record this, I'm actually here now. And over the last year, I've spent a lot more time here connecting with people and reconnecting with my roots and with my country. And in many ways, I have been driven by this sense to give back. And give back also to my country, and feeling very grateful for all that my parents have done for me. As immigrants, maybe you or some of your listeners will know, it's tough living when you immigrate out of your country and you start from zero again and build yourself up. I've always been very grateful for the chances that they've given me in life. And that's opened up a lot of doors to me to go and get an incredible education, go to the best schools. And then that's opened up doors for me to have a wonderful career and build what I've built in my life. So I do think it's important to state that. I have always been a very driven, ambitious woman. And I've always been motivated. And I've always wanted to maximize my life, whatever that looks like. Now, what I did was that I followed the life's rule book, or what society tells us is the rule book if you want to have a great life. I went to the best schools. I got the highest grades. I got into great companies. My last 15 years I've spent in the corporate sector working for big pharma companies. I've worked for prestigious consulting organizations. I worked for the World Economic Forum. I did an incredible leadership program there. I most recently worked at a dermatology company that was undergoing IPO and had a fantastic role. So I did all these things, right? Ticking the boxes exercise in a way, like best schools, great jobs, prestigious organizations, fast track progression. I always tried to take care of myself, to look good, to be everything I could be, because that's what I thought would guarantee me to have a good life. And it wasn't until around a year and a half ago where I had a really big break and a pivotal transformation in my life's journey, where I realized that actually all of these things that I've been doing and the rules of society that I've been living by had left me feeling very far from fulfilled and satisfied. And if anything, had left me feeling completely sick and drained. And I was depressed. I was burned out. I was disconnected from myself. I had forgotten how to hear that inner voice that guides us all. And I was just not living life the way that I wanted to live it. I was in a relationship that on paper seemed wonderful, but I was miserable. We were in a very unhealthy dynamic because I didn't know how to give love to myself. So how can I expect that I can give it to another or even allow myself to receive it from another? And at work, I had my dream role. I was the chief of staff to the CEO of this company, and I'd always dreamt I would be the chief of staff to the CEO. And I really hated the role. And he was a wonderful boss. The company was great, but I just didn't feel like I was bringing my best to it. And it wasn't filling me in the way that I expected to be fulfilled. And at some point, I reached a tipping point, and I remember like commuting to work and just sitting on the train and just feeling myself like going through the motions of you wake up, you get ready for work, you rush into the office, you do the things, you finish work, you go home, you go through the same motions, and then it all starts again. And I just remember sitting there on a train and I was like, wait a minute, like scene cut, this is not my life. Like, why am I here? What's going on? This is not my life, and I want a different life. And I remember feeling stuck in that. And I didn't necessarily make the change right away, but at least that there's that realization and the awareness that I had that maybe I wanted something different for myself, because this rule book that I'd been following has not working out for me. And if I spend the rest of my career trying to impress my parents and feel good enough, then clearly it's not going to take me to where I want to be. So if I wanted to live my best life, my one precious life, I would have to let go of a lot of what I knew. I had these calls before, earlier than the beginning of last year. But the call of the extrinsic motivators, right? The recognition that I had, the successful career that I had, the titles, the prestige, the money that came with it, right? The comfortable lifestyle. Like, I like a good lifestyle, all these things that came with it. They pulled me much stronger than that inner voice that was like, maybe this isn't it. And I really had to reach rock bottom where I got sick and where I literally crumbled, and everything around me I just felt so disconnected from myself and from everything around me. For that to happen, for me to actually make the change. And I always say, what's the moment in which we shift? And at the time, and for a long time, I've been saying, it's probably when the suffering and the pain becomes bigger than the safety of staying where we are. Yes. And one other thing I realized for myself is that I remembered back to that little girl and that voice that was always with me to say, I want to maximize my life. I want more. I want to give as much as I can. I want to live as much as I can. And in that moment, something happened to me. And I remember this very, very clearly. I just remember I sat there and I said, I want more from my life. This isn't it. I want more, and I'm ready to claim more. And this is a make or break moment for me. In this moment, I can choose to stay here, live this life that's become a lie. I can choose to continue working at a relationship that probably is going to end up falling apart completely. I can choose to perform at a job for as long as I can, take the sick leave and maybe come back. Or I can just choose to step out of all of it and start again. And I took that choice. So my relationship ended. I left my job and I left my home. And I swear to you, if somebody had said to me, you're going to be 35 years old, you're going to be jobless, partnerless, homeless, I would have said, no, thank you. Take me back. Like, I'm done with this life. I'll go to the next one. I would have not stuck around. But the liberation and the freedom that I felt in that moment, it still gives me goosebumps. And nothing can ever replace that feeling, because there is no quality of life without freedom. None. And that is when I realized that is my top value. And I remember just sitting there, and I didn't have any of these things that society tells you that would make you happy. And yet I felt free. I felt free, and I felt that I could now create from nothingness the life that was truly aligned to me. Not what society tells me, but what I came here to be and who I came here to be and what I came here to do. And that's that process that really started last year for me, that I've been on this journey since then.
Amazing. I think just hearing you speak, we can feel that sense of liberation and freedom, and the joy. You mentioned so many things, right? From hitting rock bottom to finding yourself. How did you navigate that phase where you hit rock bottom? You didn't want something, but did you know what you wanted?
Yeah. So here's something important that just came to me that I feel like I have to say. As humans, we have loss aversion, and it's a normal human thing. So we don't like to jump to something or leave a situation unless we know what's next. And so one of the things that was holding me back a lot was exactly this. I'm like, great, I'm going to leave, but then how do I know if I'm going to get better? That's a big risk. How will I know if I'm actually going to get a better relationship in a way, or who do I have to be for that? How do I know if I'm going to get a job that actually feels more aligned, or will I really build a career that feels more aligned? Those are very natural questions that we ask ourselves. And in that moment, I remember having the same qualms, right? But what we have to realize is that you cannot create when you are already, your life is full, because creation only happens from a process of nothingness. So we have to enter that void. That void is a natural space where we have to be before we can create something new. So that's why it's, if you want to create something new, you have to create from the nothingness. The universe loves a vacuum and it loves to fill space. But if you don't have that space, then you can't create. And paradoxically, this is the whole issue, right? This is what keeps us stuck. It's, we want to know what's next, but we don't know what's next until we actually give ourselves the chance to be in the nothingness. And I think this is one like big realization that I had at the time. And funnily enough, because you mentioned feeling stuck, you know what kept me stuck? The ambivalence kept me stuck. The do I leave or do I not leave? That's the feeling of stuckness. I felt peace the moment that I left. The moment that you make the jump and you have this trust fall with life, then you feel peace. It's scary. I woke up in like panic a lot of times. Okay, what am I doing with my life? But I was grieving. And at the same time, that also is, it's a natural part of the process. But the stuckness really left the moment that I got out of my ambivalence of do I stay or do I go? You're right. I think to some extent, it does involve a little bit of courage. You have to make that, because as I said, either you have a choice in that moment. Do you stay small and do you stay stuck? Or do you take the risk? And it is a risk. Do you take the risk to figure out exactly what you're capable of and exactly how powerful you are?
And it's easy for us now on hindsight to be describing it, but let's zoom in on when that actually happened, which I love the way you phrased it. The moment to shift is the point at which the suffering becomes bigger than the safety of staying where we are. Tell us a bit more about that actual point where you decided enough is enough. Like, how did you decide, okay, now the suffering's too much?
Look, the thing is, it was like a bit of a domino effect. And I have tips for people how to do it. They don't have to do it the way that I did it, because I'm a person of extremes. Like, I'm the type of person that will burn everything down so I can start again. But that's just also in my personality. And I think some people might resonate with that, because they'll say, like, some people like to make cosmetic shifts on things and, do one thing at a time. And I recommend that for some people. You don't have to be as extreme as I was. But I felt like everything inside of me, there was like this energy that was like, just burn it down to the ground and start again. But it was very tangibly. I did this Tony Robbins seminar, and Tony Robbins is a contested figure. Take it with a grain of salt. I think doing one of his seminars builds a lot of momentum in your life. And so it gives you this new perspective, this outside in perspective on where you are. And that's, I think, that helped me get the realization of, I want more and I deserve more. And I'm not settling for this. So now I have to start making the changes. So the first thing I did was I gave in my resignation. And then it was a domino effect. I gave in my resignation, and then my ex and I, we took a break. We said, okay, let's spend time apart. I went to Dubai to my friends, and then I came back and it was clear. I thought we would start again to maybe have some time, and then I still wasn't ready to let go of this relationship, that we would continue working, but it was clear within that one discussion that we had to separate because we just did not speak the same language anymore. And when I knew I had to separate, then I was like, I'm living here. And not to get too much into the details, he's, oh, but you can continue living here for the month. I'm like, nobody. I'm like, this is not going to happen. I need to have my own space. Like, we're done. So I called up my mom and I was like, listen, I'm coming home. I need your help. We got to figure this out. She's no problem. And that's actually when you realize the importance also of family and having a support network. And that's a very other big thing to know is we always think we're alone in these moments. And it's in those moments where the support of others shines through and you really have to allow yourself to receive and to receive that support, because I didn't do anything alone. I went to my cousin. I slept at her place. God bless her. And then I went to my parents. And I put all my things in storage. And tactically, that's what happened. It wasn't glamorous at all. I put all my furniture in storage. I went back to my parents' home and was there until I figured out what's next. And so that's what the steps look like.
Moving back to our parents' homes as we're going through these big transitions. Yes, it serves as a big reminder that we're not alone. But then again, it comes with an added layer of growth. You were in this phase of letting go of things that didn't serve you anymore. And you went back to that familiar, safe space of your parents' home. What was that journey like for you?
Let's also not forget, at this point when I left, I was so burned out. I needed to restore my sanity and my sense of safety and my sense of being. And I really welcome to have the nurturance of my mother. And I have a very good relationship with my parents. And I would say it's even better now since last year, and also some inner healing work that I did around childhood patterns, which I can talk a little bit about more too. But I really welcomed having her support. She's always been my biggest supporter, my number one fan, and she's always been there for me through thick and thin. And it was great. And I realized it's a privilege to be able to go back to parents where you have a great relationship with them. And I have to say, I also very quickly went traveling. It's not like I stayed around the house the whole time. I went to India, where I went to this Ayurveda retreat because I really needed to restore my sense of well-being. I was there for a week or two. Then I continued my travels. I went to another like self-development program. So it was more of what I use as my base. But from there, I traveled, I did things, I met with friends. It was mainly just me on my journey of finding my joy again and finding what I love and finding that sense of identity and reconnecting to that inner voice. But yeah, look, it's not always glamorous. There was definitely times throughout last year where I was like, why am I 36 years old and sleeping in my childhood bedroom? This is not okay, like in any way. And I definitely had moments of, okay, this is a kick in the butt. Now I have to get going and I have to be financially stable again and make things happen. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Let's not go towards something because of the pressure to get away from something else. Let's only go towards something and what I'm supposed to be doing in my vocation and my life's work when it's really pulling me towards. At the time, I made a very conscious effort. I was like, I really wanted to put myself on a timeout and on a sabbatical. And there could have been many things that I could have gotten involved in projects wise, but I consciously said no. I said no when it took all of me to say no, because I knew that it would distract my energy from where it really needed to be. And it was my inner journey. It was the inner self. That's where I needed to be through last year.
And as you mentioned, taking time off to create nothing, like to create nothingness in your life so you could create something better and bigger for yourself. And you went on all these retreats, moved back to your parents' house. How did you find the compassion for yourself as you were going through this journey? Like, we all have bad days where we're questioning our choices and where we want that financial security and stability and we don't know where we're moving. On those days, how did you find compassion?
Well, quite frankly, some days I didn't. That's the honest answer. And I think a lot of last year has really been a journey of learning how to find acceptance for myself, hold myself with that compassion, and find forgiveness and give myself a little bit of grace. And just remember, really, I think the big guiding thing for me has been that I am on my own path. I am on my own trajectory. And I think when we buy into this fallacy of what society tells us is the right thing and playing the rules of the game, then we think we're late. We're not late. Nobody is late. You're never late for your own destiny. So I think it's this like shifting in your own mindset around What's mine is mine. It won't miss me, and it'll come in the time when it's ready for me. So I think having this practice of repeating this to myself helped a lot. And I did something called the Hoffman process last year. It's a 1 week residential program where you basically look at all of the patterns that you've adopted in childhood to earn the love of your caretakers, basically. And so over time, as we grow into adults, these patterns, they're just patterns of behavior, but we've adopted them to almost be our identity. So we've over identified with these patterns. So let's say, for instance, you saw your father getting angry when you were a child. So in order to get his attention, you start getting angry too, right? And so over time, you're like aggressive being, but it's not really you. It's just your pattern of behavior because that's what you learned that you thought you had to do in order to get love and be noticed. So it's a week program where you look at these patterns, you heal them, you transcend them, and then you ideally put new ones in place. The program was very transformational, but this was a quite an interesting tipping point for me. And I want to mention it as a tool to others who might be called to explore whether it's fitting for them. But honestly, I think this went a long way in healing the relationship with my parents because it helped me heal really the relationship also with myself. And it allowed me for the first time in my life, no joke, because I'm not a mother yet, to really experience unconditional love and to experience it as something that's not external to me and something that I don't have to earn. It is me. It's love, is light. And it's really the first time when, and I say these words, but I used to always say them, but now I actually mean them because I've felt them. And with that comes a very healthy dose of compassion. Because at the end of the day, it's one and the same in many ways. And we, when we follow this collective societal values of what is right and wrong and what it means to live a good life, we begin to naturally self-abandon. We do, because we're born with this inner voice, with this inner compass that guides us. But over time, first it's our parents, then it's our caretakers, authority figures, society. Over time, we numb it out. And therefore, by just naturally, we are self-abandoning. We stop hearing it, disconnect from it. And we disconnect from our ability to really be safety for ourselves and take care of ourselves and love ourselves and guide ourselves and be our own authorities. I think we have to accept that this is just what happens when we live in a society like ours until we hit this individuation process where we then go on this inner journey of figuring out like, what is truth for me? And how can I tune back into that? And I think for me, the Hoffman process was quite a pivotal part in that journey. Apart from being able to, it broke my heart open. Like I felt love for everything, for me and for everything around me and everyone around me. I went back to a lot of the tools that I learned there to hold myself with gentle compassion as I struggled through a lot of the dark moments of this too, right? Because let's face it, it's not an easy journey always. It's not all hearts and roses. It's lonely. It's lonely, and you lose a lot of the connections and the people as well.
Anelia, I wanted to ask you if would you have any tips for someone who is in a situation where they're starting to question their life, whether this is it, this is as good as life gets, feeling like they're in the rat race, and even if they're winning, they still feel like a rat. Let's say they have kids, and it just feels impossible to create space. So they're starting to have the courage to even ask themselves these questions, start having these doubts. How can someone like this start experimenting with creating nothingness? Is it a course like the Hoffman you said, or would you have any other recommendations?
First of all, I don't think that anything is truly impossible. It's only impossible if you think it's impossible. So I'm going to push back on that a little bit. What you said, that if they have kids, then they can't create space. I think that's an excuse. And I can be controversial in that, but that's okay. I don't need to be agreeable for everyone. Because I truly believe that to a large extent, we do create our reality. Not to a large extent, we create our reality. And so what we see around us is a mirror of where we are internally in our own healing journey. I want to preface that before I answer your question. So if somebody is coming to me and saying that they want to make a change, but they think it's impossible, my question would be for them to have a look at what are they holding on to? that's making them feel like it is impossible. Because when there is a will, there is a way. And it doesn't only come from you and your own sense of consciousness. There's a larger force at play. It's almost like this interplay with life where if you commit to say, I want to make the change, the way that events line up, the synchronicities that happen to enable you to really create that change, mind blowing. And I've experienced in my own life. Very tangibly, what I would say though, because maybe that doesn't connect with a lot of people yet, and that's cool, is that start getting clarity on what is a clear yes for you. Because as I mentioned, the one thing that we lose touch with is that inner voice that guides us and that inner authority. Because we've been told this lie that in order to feel safe, we have to play by the rules of society's game. And so we have to reconnect with that inner voice and that inner authority. And one of the simplest ways to do that is just start asking yourself like simple questions like, what is an absolute yes for me? I'll give you an example. For me, an absolute yes, I need to have my cappuccino every morning. Like that lights me up. That's an absolute yes. My matcha in the afternoon, that's an absolute yes. It's simple things like that. Get a feel for that. What are things that really like light you up? What is an absolute yes? Because then you get to experience what that feeling is like in your body. And also start thinking about like energetically, when you're around certain things or certain people or in certain environments, what makes you constrict? What really makes you constrict and pull away versus what makes you open up? What expands you? What makes you feel alive? Start there. And it's even, do I want to have Chinese tonight or do I want to have pizza? Don't just go with it. Ask yourself, how many times do we go through the motions of these super simple things? Just get so present. That's how you start to make space.
Neha, what's an absolute yes for you? And how do you feel it? Anelia related very much to a feeling of expansion and contraction when something makes you feel alive, and the contrary. For you, what is it, Neha?
An absolute yes, an absolute yes. For me, it's a sense of peace. Maybe that's the way I feel expansion within me. Because when I'm not entirely sure, there's always a certain nagging thing within me. It doesn't feel peaceful. It's not calm. When it's an absolute yes, I'm like there are no questions. There's actually no excitement even. It's just a yes. I'm just doing this. I'm not going to question it. What about you?
But what is the trivial thing?
Oh, what is the trivial thing? Yeah. Oh, an absolute yes for me lately is yoga every morning. No questions. Even if it's just 10 minutes. And you?
For me, an absolute yes, given I'm absolutely grateful to be living near the sea, is to go for a dip. I can cycle down to the sea, quick dip into freezing Atlantic here in Portugal, come back all in 45, 50 minutes. I come back like radically alive is the best word for it. What does that feel like? It means literally my skin feels as if it's moving. My skin feels as if it's a separate being and suddenly it's moving. I have a sensation in the back of my head, which I don't know if it's energy moving up or down. Definitely some energy flows going there that's showing me that I really am enjoying this. I'm super fulfilled by doing this. And although I'm not always conscious of this, I lean more forward. So we naturally lean towards the things we like and enjoy. If we're going through life with fear or with restrictions or with obstacles or things that hold us back, like literally for a lot of people, this will show up in their posture. So these are, the symptoms of my radical aliveness.
I love what you said. And also it's so funny because this leaning back and leaning forth, I've actually realized this even when I meet people and form new relationships, without even being able to intellectualize it, my body naturally either is drawn or then just pulls away. And I'm like, where is that from? And it's things like that where our body is sending us signals all the time. And so I think just becoming aware to what is happening without judgment and just without any attachment to it, but just saying, oh, wow, that's interesting. Like my body moved away. Don't try to explain it because intuition cannot be explained. The body knows. Like we have so much knowledge within. It's just a matter of saying, okay, I heard you. And that's all. Because the moment that you say, okay, I heard you, next time it speaks a little louder. And next time it speaks a little louder. And then you develop this relationship where you can actually really start trusting that inner voice and being able to discern if it's fear versus really like your inner truth. And it's just through practice. It's this little by little. It takes time and there's no silver bullet, but that's how you train it, like any muscle.
For somebody whose mind is extremely active, and a lot of the people listening would have a very active mind, right? And who aren't able to really find the time or maybe the space to tap into the body's intelligence, what is a daily practice that you might recommend? So we take those baby steps towards listening to the body's intelligence.
Yes. Neha, what gives it away that I have such a active mind?
Just my intuition.
It's a very good point. We're very cerebral. And even if we're not, we train ourselves to be. And so then it's very difficult to unlearn that. And don't get me wrong, it's great to be that way, but not in all situations. So to get back more in tune with your kind of the inner voice in the body and to calm the mind, my number one thing is I practice Kundalini yoga. But I know that maybe it's just something to put out there. Somebody might say, hey, I'm ready to explore this. This is the call I needed. They should go. There's a lot of resources I can send to you guys if you want to direct people to explore Kundalini yoga. But any kind of mindfulness or meditation practice is wonderful. One of my favorite things to do, where I really find it quiets my mind, is to go into the forest. It's really, my thing is, I would say nature altogether, but in particular, it's forest walks. And this is also, I think, clinically proven, this forest bathing, that it can be really resetting for the nervous system, right? Another tool is the morning pages, which is this stream of consciousness writing, which is from the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's another fantastic resource that I would recommend to people who are looking to make a change or reconnect to that inner voice to guide them. We're all creative. So I think that title can throw people off sometimes, but it's a really fantastic workbook. And one of the tools that's in that is the stream of consciousness morning pages writing, which basically means that you set your alarm in the morning for 30 minutes earlier, and you do 3 pages of just whatever comes to your mind without any thinking, without any overdoing, right? You just write and write. Even if you have nothing to write, you just write, I don't know what to write. I don't have anything to write. And then something will come. Because we have all this matter, all these thoughts and everything that we, even the moment we wake up, there's the chatter in the mind that we just clear out and get the junk out, so that we can get to that point of that baseline that will then really, that inner voice will then come through. So I think those are all places to start.
So just to tap into the consciousness stream writing. So every morning, it's 3 pages. Are there any specific ways we're meant to write?
All you need is a notebook and a pen. That's why I love it. It's so
it.
accessible. And actually, Zabi, I want to hear your perspective on this too, because I know you said it's like, hey, actually, that doesn't work for me. So again, I think with this tool, try what works. But this is very simple. You do need to write with a pen and a paper, don't cheat on the laptop, because it activates a different part of our brains when we do that, right? So that's what we really want to do. So you want to get into the practice of engaging the subconscious mind. And so you write, it doesn't matter what you write. You don't even read it. It's just to get this verbal kind of diarrhea on the page. Sorry for my language. But ultimately what it is. And actually, it's so interesting because if you do it long enough and you do it consistently, at some point, there's this voice that just starts speaking and you start writing, and it's coming from your highest self, the self that's not afraid, the self that knows, that has the intelligence, that knows what's best for you. And I have solved quite a lot of dilemmas in this way through writing with morning pages. I have to say, at this point, I'm not doing it. And I want to be very transparent about that, because with every tool, you do it as long as it serves you. And the moment that it stops serving you, you stop, because that's also you honoring yourself and what's true to you. Because the thing is, it's not about the tool. The tool is not important. It's just the mechanism to get to your truth. So whether it's yoga, meditation, forest walks, a gratitude practice, journaling, coaching, therapy, whatever your tool is, or doing psychedelics, whatever your thing is, find your thing, the thing that speaks to you, that allows you to access that truth within. The tool doesn't matter. You matter. Your voice matters. It's just the gateway to get there. So if it doesn't serve you, try something else. It doesn't matter. That's what people are like, what is the tool? There is no lead tool. I'm sorry. That's our minds, again, our egos trying to control and know that they're going to get the best possible outcome. So if it doesn't work, leave it and try something else.
Yeah, 100% agree with choose a tool that works for you. And also the tools are evolving as we are, right, as to what resonates for us. I have a question here though, in terms of the inner voice that you mentioned, especially with something like writing.
Before you ask that question, I'm sorry. Can I just say, Zafi, I see you smiling and I'm super curious to know
Okay, go on.
why you're smiling.
Very perceptive. I actually wanted to double click on two things that you mentioned. One was on Kundalini yoga, on making yoga a regular practice for me, not daily. I've had months where it was daily. These days it's 3 or 4 times a week. My mind was saying, Sabi, this is not productive. You could be doing so many other things. While my brain didn't say this is a way of being present and connecting with my body, because I was trying to connect with my body and nothing was happening. But something within me said, keep doing yoga. And my brain came up with an excuse. I'm a very sporty guy. Doing yoga, at least a stretchy version of it, is going to have preventative effects for injury. I'm going to get less injuries in tennis. Then yes, I'll keep going. I kept doing yoga, even though for months and months, it's like, this isn't getting me any present. My to-do list is in my head as I do this. So I found a way of at least giving it a good go, right? At least experimenting with it longer than just a few days. So I think to India's point, use the tool that works for you. I think that's very hard because it does require some level of trust in the unknown, perhaps some consistency before you start seeing results. So a tool may not give results in 3 days, maybe not 3 months, maybe not 3 years. Now I am more in touch with my body and I'm able to have calm periods where I'm more present. To the stream of consciousness, writing, I tried that a few times. I think let's call it 10 to 15 times. And it didn't work for me. And there I didn't find a story or narrative that kept up the motivation for me to keep going. And I stopped. And I stopped actually for 2 or 3 years before. In a spiritual retreat, I was inspired to try left-handed writing because I was explained that the right-hand side of our body is the masculine, and it's connected actually above the neck to the left-hand side. So there's an energetic flow like this way. And this is the prefrontal cortex where all the rational, analytical, logical processing takes place, and that's linked to the right arm. If you write with your non-dominant hand, which for me is the left, I'm actually not using that part of the brain. So I bypass it and access something else. Let's call it the subconscious, whatever, but something else. And it just clicked. It's like the first time I did it and it just clicked. And I was writing stuff. I was like, I don't know where this is coming from. Let's just keep writing. Stop analyzing monkey brain. Just keep going because something's happening here that feels a bit magical. And I wrote a page that then I reread because as I was writing it, I wasn't processing it because it was a different part of my brain. So I had to reread what I wrote to actually understand what's going on. And so many of those messages resonated in a very deep way. Some of them were very practical. Some of them were a bit more lofty, but the point is very relevant, as if I was accessing, as Anelia was saying, some kind of inner voice, higher self, other form of intelligence and other information field that I'm not usually attuned to. But this tool enabled me to get in tune with it and download whatever information was there. So that was a huge sense of success for me. It happened 2 or 3 weeks ago about left-handed writing or non-dominant handwriting.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
My question is around, when do we choose to give up on a tool? So you tried consciousness, dream journaling, and it didn't work for you initially, Sabi. And you're like, no, I've done this 15 times. Nope, like not my thing. Somewhere you found non-dominant handwriting. So Anelia, like the question to you too is, have you found any way to figure out that, okay, this tool is not for me? Or because there is a little bit about consistency too, that we're meant to try something for a little bit to figure out if this is for me. And then there's that awareness of this doesn't work for me. So how do we find that balance?
Without overcomplicating it. If it's not enjoyable for me, I'm not going to do it consistently. And so therefore it's a no-go. I just think that you have to enjoy the process. It's not just about the outcome. And I think this is the whole thing of shifting our mindset. And part of this transformation that happened with me, this what I call this, like I say Anelia 2.0, but really it's just me getting more and more back to my real true self. It's shifting away from what it should look like at the out at the end goal to what the process itself feels like, and being much more in love with the process. So if I'm not enjoying my process, I'm not going to force myself to do a tool if I think it's going to get me somewhere. Because again, we have to remember, what is the end objective is to get to a truer place of you, to reconnect with you. And so I'll try anything once because I'm just a curious person. So I'll try a bunch of different things. Probably like I have boundaries on a few things, like in the self-development space. Sometimes if it doesn't speak to me, I won't do it. But generally, I'm open. I'm curious, right? Because every new experience will teach us something. But then if you make it to make it a consistent practice, there has to be an element of you to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, just pick something else.
That's great. I think it's reminding me of the management decision making elective with Neil Bearden at INSEAD. And he would always say, we can only control the process, never the outcome.
So all we control is our inner world. We're entirely responsible for our inner world and for our inner experience, which determines our outer experience, right? And so therefore you do control the full process if we look at it from that perspective. But outcomes, we don't control at all. And I want to take us in a direction. There's this thing around developing a relationship with the unknown. And Zabi, you mentioned this earlier a little bit because you said you have to trust the process and you're expecting to get an outcome from the tool, but you have to trust to keep going. And you kept going with that. Something told you. And I link that to becoming comfortable being in the unknown. Our minds convince us that we want to know what the outcome is before we go into something. We only assess something based on what the outcome is like. But that's this dance with life, that it's about being more in these feminine energetics of developing a relationship with the unknown and doing everything we can from our side to take responsibility for what we bring into a situation, but then surrendering what that outcome will look like. And this concept of surrender is so foreign to us as a society, because Western society is very much based on this kind of masculine values of achievement, outcomes, competition, and I would say a bit more wounded masculine than really the strongest, healthy expression of a masculine. And so we shouldn't blame ourselves for this. It's just learned behaviors. But now I feel there's a shift, an energetic shift more towards bringing in feminine energetics to leadership into society around how do we surrender? How do we trust more in a process? How do we trust more in that intuition, in that inner voice? And so we see a rise in this, and there is a need to balance out these energies. And this also brings me to the topic of detached involvement. This is probably my biggest tool that I'm using right now. I'm obsessed with this topic, the concept of detached involvement. For all of us that can relate, if you've been to INSEAD, you're most likely an A-type, ambitious person, right? That wants to achieve something in the world, leave a mark, you have a fantastic career track record, all these things. And then also we've been faced, all of us, probably with situations that we feel are completely out of control. Some cataclysmic event will happen in our life, like we go through a divorce, or there's a health crisis, or we lose someone that we love, or we lose our job. It's the shared human experience. And then these things pull the rug underneath our feet. And it's like, how did I get here? And so they get us to start asking questions. And at the same time, they help us understand that we don't control life. Sometimes we have to allow life to lead us. So I have this practice around detached involvement where it's like this interplay between what I want and I set my vision, and then simultaneously I surrender to what life wants to do through me. And my mantra really is, look, life, like I have my vision for what I want to achieve and I surrender it to you. I just give it away. And I ask that you return it to me in the shape and the form that will bring me the highest joy and will be the greatest good for everyone involved. Because how it looks, I will then get attached to the wrong outcome. That's a very masculine thing of like how it looks. That's what society tells us. The right car, it's the right job, it's the right relationship. How it looks is so important. We've all been in these rights and we know that they don't feel good. They don't feel right. They make us feel numb. We don't feel alive in them. We don't feel true. So I don't want to get attached to an outcome of how something is supposed to look like. What I want to know is that I trust life to give it back to me in the way that will feel the best for me. And this is a constant journey. This is not easy. I feel like my life's work is in this, especially for A-types who we like to control and we're ambitious and we're so driven to achieve certain outcomes.
You spoke about detached involvement. Practically, what does that practice look like?
I have the perfect example for you right now, and I'm going to be a bit vulnerable with this share because I'm very much in my situation right now. It's brewing, but I'm in a moment right now where life is really asking me to surrender. And I am going through my own situation where I'm in the early phases of a relationship. And I started projecting a lot onto this relationship of I want to be a mother and I want to get married, and I could see myself getting married to this person and having the kids. And in my mind, I'm like, I saw the outcome. And then of course they say if you see your path clearly, then it's not your path. But I'm like, maybe this is finally it. And very recently, because I've strengthened my inner voice so much and I can tell when it's my true self not being aligned with something, I have felt that this is not an aligned relationship for me. And on paper, it's great. And there's a part of me that's, no, stick with it. This is a great partner. You could build something wonderful. You could get what you want. And at the same time, I'm like, but it doesn't feel true to me. And so I'm in this moment of surrender where I'm not fully ready to let go, but I have had to make the decision to honor myself. And it's the most loving thing that I can do. It's the most fair and loving thing that I can do for him, for me, and for us is to end it. Because otherwise it's not truthful. It's not truthful. And so I have to surrender this great desire that I have, my heart's yearning really to be a mother in this moment in time, and trust the timing of life. For whatever reason, it's not happening for me right now. And I have to be okay with that. I'm literally in this week, this whole process. So it's very real and raw for me.
Yeah, to trust divine timing.
I may want it, but what do I know from my limited mind? Maybe there's some reason that I'm not ready. And Zabi, you said this earlier. I think when we're in the moment, it's unclear, right? But then when we look back, and I'm sure I'll look back and I'll say, oh, I'm so thankful that it happened exactly the way that it did, because maybe at the time I wasn't ready. And maybe it wasn't the right person. Maybe circumstances just weren't great. And there's this thing of developing this trust with life that I trust that looking back on it, I'll be able to say, wow, that really happened in divine timing for me. And I can't force it.
It's amazing to hear you say that. And thank you for sharing what's very present for you these days around the inner battle when we're going from a state of victimhood, which is the first stage of consciousness, where life is happening to us, and then going to what you mentioned is life is happening through you. So what does love or spirit or oneness want to do through you? Requires very big leap of faith and just lots of inner work, right? To build that trust in the universe and yourself that there is this divine plan, and we're not here on this planet to suffer. We're here to evolve and grow, and therefore we perceive various hardships and challenges to be a source of suffering, whereas in fact, it's all leading to some form of evolution that we are unable to see clearly at the initial stages, at least, of our awakening and of our path. So I salute you for really trying to let spirit and love act through you in the best way possible, in the most beautiful and divine way possible.
Yeah, that's really beautifully articulated, Tabia. Yeah, we're just here to learn at the end of the day. That's what we're all here to do, and just to become more of who we are and to grow and heal. And I'm making meaning out of it for myself. And I think that's the only way. It's you have to make meaning out of it. And especially when we're in situations that are difficult, how do you make meaning out of it to see what you learn, how you grow, what it's there to teach you, so you take ownership over it? And also to know that you can always lean into your support system. Like, my friends have been incredible through this time. And it's made me realize, like, that's a silver lining of everything. It's made me realize, like, how deep and meaningful my relationships are. And that's what makes life worth living in many ways, right? And I think we can get so stuck, to your point of victimhood, in our situations, to really only see it's, oh, I can't believe this is happening to me, or even just, I can't believe this is happening and it's so dark. But it only takes a small, like, mindset shift to be like, okay, and what is currently so great about my life? What is so great? Like, I am healthy, I am safe. When we are healthy and safe, all the shit that's going down in the world, let me tell you, we are privileged human beings. We have 90% of what we need, even more. The rest is just a fun game. When we are healthy and safe and our loved ones are healthy and safe. So let's put it a little bit into context. Like, a broken heart is a broken heart. It heals. It's painful, but it heals. And it's, even yesterday, I was probably in my lowest moment. And then I had still a dance party with myself, because it's my, like, daily non-negotiable. I dance every day for myself because it gets my energy, it shifts my energy, it gets me moving. And it's for me a way to celebrate life, and for me to give thanks for the fact that I'm here and I'm alive and I get the privilege of doing this every day, you know? So let's put things in perspective a little bit. And this is not spiritual bypassing. This is not me not being with my feelings. I want to make that very clear. Okay. Because I think this is where things get a little bit tricky. It's tricky territory. A lot of people will say, oh, positive thinking, oh, good vibes only. That is toxic. That is toxic. Face your feelings, feel your feelings, and also know how to call enough is enough on them, and then shift out of them into something that gives you a new perspective. It's about not being in resistance. I'm feeling overwhelmed with sadness. I will let myself be sad. I will cry and I will grieve and I will be in my feelings. And I will journal. I will do whatever I need to really be through it and breathe through it and allow it all to come through me. And then at some point, there's a part of me that we think we need more time to cry than we might actually do. At some point, it's like you're cried out. And then it's more about turning towards some levity and maybe writing in my gratitude journal, or taking myself out for a walk, or asking myself, okay, what do I need right now? How can I make myself feel supported in this moment? And giving that thing to myself, bringing a little bit of sweetness into my life. And then once I bring that little sweetness, maybe I'll talk to a friend and I'll get a new perspective. And that'll shift me entirely into a new state of being. So it's just going with the emotion. It's not being in resistance to it. Resistance would look like me knowing that I'm sad and completely numbing that feeling. Going out and partying or drinking or whatever. Like, I don't judge people, but I'm just saying, like, that's a way that we numb. It could be doing something else, like retail therapy. The whole point is that I'm avoiding it. And then posting how happy I am and laughing and dancing. That's avoidance, and that's resistance, because then it comes out very strong and it's very overwhelming. What I'm talking about is just being with the experience.
I read somewhere, when you're sitting with your feelings, you feel what you feel. And when it's time to switch from the victimhood mode, it's not about making yourself feel 10% or 20% better. It's just 1% better in that moment. And that could just mean getting out of bed. That's it. But to be aware that you are feeling what you're feeling, and taking those steps towards not being in that victim mindset anymore. In these situations, in your experience, you mentioned having a really strong support system, friends, family. It's really difficult to do a lot of these things by ourselves, right? Like it's a lot of times it's easy to be a victim when we're by ourselves because the mind loves it. What has been your experience in terms of opening yourself up to your support system or others like coaches, therapists, healers to help you?
No, I have not always been open. I am the one who's always helping other people. I am like, and my friends always say, and not even my friends, but even other people, they say, you want to know everything about us, but you don't share anything about you and what's really happening for you. There's like this resistance to that. And I think I'm being open, but maybe there's not as much. So it's been a constant journey of me. And speaking also of being in this, like embodying more feminine energetic, allowing ourselves to receive and to open up to help has been a big part of my journey too. Because I've always actually been really bad asking for help because I've seen it and society has told us to see it as a weakness, right? So we don't want to seem weak. We want to seem like we have all the answers, like we know what's up. So it's been super difficult, but I found that's actually what alienates. That's what makes you actually feel like you're alone. And it's the ego that has us thinking that we are separate. It's the ego that has us thinking that we're the only ones going through this. Nobody will understand our pain because nobody has experienced it the way that we have. And we keep ourselves isolated more than we actually are in reality. Because when you open up, you recognize how many people are going through the same journey as you. Just as an example, I remember earlier in this year, I shared my story on another podcast, and a lot of people reached out to me who are looking at making these career pivots and going through life transformations to say, hey, thank you so much for sharing, because just hearing you speak made me feel like I'm not alone. And I think that's what we realized so many of us are going. And maybe that's the other thing I wanted to say. It's Carl Jung was the first one who talked about this sense of this individuation process that we follow, which is in the beginning of our lives, we're on this trajectory where we embody the collective values and the collective ideals. And then all of a sudden we individuate, which essentially means we start questioning, is this us, the collective, or what are the real individual values that we want to abide to and live our lives by? And our society has taught us that this is not natural, but it's so natural. Who hasn't had cataclysmic events happen to them in their life of some sort that usually shocks them into questioning of what is out there and what is all this for? And so I think the whole point is that we are not actually alone. It's the ego that makes us feel like we are. And the moment that you can, it's so difficult. It's difficult, but we got to do tough things, and we can do tough things. Start asking for help, even in the smallest ways. Challenge yourself until you really make it a habit. And sometimes asking for help could just mean, hey, I just want to share with you what's going on. Just opening up with your story.
That just reminds me of how I'm very present with these days about the importance for me personally, for men around me, men on this planet, to be doing that kind of sharing. And that sharing can be so simple of forming a men's circle. And there's just something magical that happens in men's circles and equally in women's circles. So when the masculine energies are concentrated and there's no interruption of the other energy, so equally for women, it's such a powerful space to be in. And when there's a little bit of facilitation and structure around not talking about sports and the pub, but instead a little bit deeper. I mean, the kinds of things I have witnessed in my circles, and I've had the privilege of sharing myself and seeing the effects of it within me, is unbelievable. And that leads me to go back to one of Anelia's points around being with the experience, the importance of feeling. It's easy to say, but from my own journey, I know it's very hard. For most men, it's actually very hard. There's so many steps to get there. One step is that often we don't even know we're suppressing whatever emotions are happening. We don't know we're doing it because it's the norm. There's no awareness. Then there is, let's say I'm suppressing, I'm now aware of it. There's ignorance about what's the alternative and so what? Yeah, I suppress it. Great, good for me. I'm a man and I can stand stoic and unemotional and lead. And then next step, okay, let's say I do feel it. is that the kind of man I even want to be? The kind of man that feels? Because what does that look like? There's not that many role models out there. There's an increasing movement to be accepted that a man has feelings, but it's still like we're at the very first centimeter of a very long journey to evolve into a heart-led man that is integrating the feminine energy and the emotional body to partner with our existing masculine to become whole again. It's extremely important work of our time. And as I said, I find it very difficult, even now after lots of work, but I now at least see the benefits. So I'm no longer fighting the ignorance or awareness. I'm just fighting the good fight around feeling it and being with it and being in those moments, because it's practice. If you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know. No. And wow, thank you so much for sharing that. This is probably even a discussion for another time to go into talking about masculine and feminine and how to integrate the energetics and what healthy versus an unhealthy expression of them looks like, how it's affecting us as people, as leaders. And more, I'm drawn into this direction, and it's informing a lot of my own coaching practice right now. I have so much compassion for men because they've been taught to suppress feelings. We as women, it's more easy for us, or society has told us it's easier, that we should be okay to connect with our feminine expression. But for men, it's not the case. Let's get away from gender, right? We're talking about energetics. Like you could be a man and have a core feminine energetic, and you could be a woman and have a core masculine energetic, but we haven't been told what these look like in their healthy expression. And we've, if anything, we've been shown what they look like in a very unhealthy expression. So we have women struggling in this system, and we have men equally struggling. What we need is an overhaul so that men can freely express and own their full selves and know how to be in touch with their emotions and allow that to be something that society accepts more openly and encouraged.
Yeah. And as you were saying this, well, what I'm present with is just how loaded the word feeling is, especially for men, in the sense that as soon as that word is said out loud, a whole range of stifling associations appear in my mind. Imagine if we could call it something like energy or XT. And instead of saying I have feelings of sadness, energy XT 5-2 is going through me, and I've been taught that it needs to go through my body and be with it. Otherwise, it'll create like some kind of physical ailment. Every man would be like, all right, energy XT, here we go.
Hold on.
Right?
Hold on. You can patent that.
Yeah. There's so much deconditioning to be done around men, and that it's okay to feel. It is an information field, a very valuable one that we should be embracing.
Anelia, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about something you mentioned at the start of this talk. You mentioned living in your freedom. As we enter this ascension, or whatever we want to call it, transformation, like our 2.0 versions, freedom becomes such an important value for most of us. How have you balanced that with security?
I will tell you that I haven't balanced it, because clearly before I was only security focused, because the system taught me that I would need to do certain things in order to feel safe and to lead a good life. So I did those things to feel safe. And then I realized that things that actually helped me feel safe got me very disconnected from self and made me feel super unhappy and miserable. And I was like, this is not the price to pay. I almost wonder, like, why do we position them as two separate sides of a coin? Like, we're saying that if we're free, thereby we cannot feel safe. And so I want to challenge that paradigm a little bit, because I believe a lot of people tend to see them as two opposite things. And I'm guilty of that myself, right? I think what has helped me feel safe is building that trust with myself and the relationship with myself. I feel right now I'm liberated. I'm living life on my own terms. Am I where I want to be? I love the process. I'm still articulating and allowing life to show me where it wants to take me in terms of my vocation. And I have other plans for myself. But I feel free in that I can navigate down to the mechanics of my day the way that I choose. I can feel free in how I express myself in my relationships. I feel free in all my interactions. And then in addition to that, I also have nurtured and fostered a relationship with self where I'm not relying on anything external to help me feel safe and secure within myself. I can't rely on the relationship or my partner to give me that sense of security. I can't rely on a job to give me that sense of security. I can't rely on anything except I trust myself to always be there for myself through thick and thin. And that is the only thing that I can control. And if I have that, I can do anything.
Yeah, and what's helped you get there to develop this sense of security within self, or maybe we call it like self-belief or self-confidence, however we want to term it.
It's been this whole journey, Neha. There's no silver bullet. I couldn't tell you that. But I think throwing myself in situations where they're unclear and uncertain and developing a relationship with uncertainty and proving to myself that I can get through these moments that are make or break, and seeing that what I'm made of and how powerful I actually am and how much life loves me to support me, even through the challenges, has helped to foster the sense of trust in life and hence also trust in myself. And I think it's this constant process of getting feedback from life. As you take a small risk and then you see it's going to be okay, so you convince yourself you can do it, that builds a little confidence. And then you do the next thing. And I think it's this big fallacy that we have if we wait to be confident before we jump into the thing. Oh, but I'm not confident. I can't do it yet. That's the whole idea. Confidence comes from the journey. Confidence doesn't come and then you do it. It builds as you do the thing because you have to prove to yourself. So it's this constant interplay. I don't have the perfect answer for you. I wish I did.
Well, what you just said is the perfect answer, because I don't think the journey looks the same for any two people.
That's right.
I was just curious
What's on your mind? What's coming up for you when you talk about that?
about freedom and security. In my own journey, I was a little extreme. In the beginning, it was all about security and safety. And then the last few years have been all about freedom. But where I am now is about integration, and not to look at security or safety as necessarily a bad thing, because I made it an evil guy in my head, but to integrate it from a space of all human beings need both. And in fact, to have that safety and security is freedom in many ways. So then we can do the things that we love, or create the kind of life that we want, or create impact that we want. And the same the other way around, right? Having freedom is security and safety, because we're moving towards this ideal version that we want. That's been my process. It's been a lot about accepting that we need both versus denying myself one part of it. Yeah, embracing and accepting it.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a distinction that I need to make when I talk about freedom, because I'm a creature of habit. I like doing the same things every day. That brings me freedom in some ways because it gets me not thinking about what I'm doing. I have my rituals and my routine, and then I can just be free to create. But when I talk about freedom, I don't necessarily mean like freedom from something, like freedom from a job I don't like, or like freedom from a relationship I don't want to be in, or freedom from something, or even the freedom to have fun and the freedom to travel. I'm just talking about freedom as a concept, not freedom from, not freedom to, just freedom. And what I mean by freedom is knowing, speaking, and living my truth. I am living in accordance to my inner compass, and I am defining my value of self from within.
Yeah, this theme of it's all about the journey, not the destination, has come up. Ironically, freedom is there all the time, but the different layers of caging, of trauma, or whatever else means that we're actually not free, but the freedom is within us.
Exactly. And this reminds me of the work of Peter Crone. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work, but you might want to check him out. I'm a big fan. And he talks a lot about this concept of freedom and how we keep ourselves contained within the shackles of our mind, and how the freedom is really about breaking free of the shackles and all these stories and narratives that we tell each other. So I very much resonate with that definition. And he always says that life shows us where we are not free. So anything that comes up in your life as a trigger, next time something like throws you completely off kilter, or you get annoyed, or you get angered or something is really triggering you, that is your gift to show you where you are not free, because you are attached to that thing and you are suffering as a result of it.
I'm smiling because Leigh and I caught up the other day, and I was sharing with her that my dad was here visiting me from Hungary here in Portugal for 3 days. And sometimes when I think, oh, yeah, I'm doing well with this inner work, I'm doing quite well and made lots of progress. And then a family member shows up and then triggers every 5 seconds. And like, oh my God, what's going on? It's like a whole list of things I have literally in my notebook that came up this week. Just 3 days? 3 days, that's it. Not 4, 3 days with my dad. And I have to work through because, yeah, family, close loved ones are the ones that go the deepest.
Yep. They'll definitely touch the deepest parts of you. Maybe you should check out the Hoffman process. I'm telling you, for me, that was a really revelationary week.
Yes, there's inner child work and shadow work. It's important line of work to be done for everyone in whatever course or format or book you choose to start off the journey with. And on the subject of books, Anelia, I wanted to ask you if there are any books that over the last 3 years have really been impactful for you and helping in this transformational journey and inner work.
Yes, I have a few that I can suggest. So the first one I already spoke about was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. That's a fantastic resource, and that's a great way to tune back into that inner voice and that inner creative that lives within all of us. And if people ask me, where do I start? Usually if I do workshops on this, that's the first book that I recommend because it's a workbook. So it's very interactive and you learn a lot about yourself over I think it's 12-week program. The second one that I would recommend is Finding Your North Star by Martha Beck. We're always changing and evolving, and we're always going through cycles of transformation and change. We go through phases where everything is changed, and then we have to find our new normal and then establish that new normal. And just as we hit that new normal, then something else changes. So it's the constant cycle of evolution. And this book is a fantastic resource because it breaks this cycle of transformation into 4 specific quadrants where you can really self-identify, and it gives you tools to deal with each. Fantastic resource. One other one that's coming up for me right now, if people are interested to dig into this masculine and feminine dynamics and the energetics around this, is by a couples therapist that I'm also lucky enough to call a friend. Her name is Danae Logan, and she wrote a book called Sovereign Love. It's like a partnership book, but I read it more as a leadership book. And it takes us through these dynamics of helping us understand how we live in this environment that encourages unhealthy expression of masculinity and what we need to do to be able to integrate the healthy masculine with the healthy feminine within us so that we can show up as better people in relationships and as better leaders and better for ourselves. That's another great book. One other one, it's around the concept of self-sabotage and how when we want good things, but we actually don't allow ourselves to have them because our thermostat level is set so low that we can't break that ceiling to actually achieve them. So we start self-sabotaging, and it's a subconscious process. And a book that's been transformational for me to allow myself to break my own glass ceiling has been The Big Leap. And this is a book by Gay Hendricks.
I've read The Big Leap. I love that bit about us having set an upper limit and not even being aware of the upper limit that we set, especially when it comes to joy or being happy or pleasure in our lives. Yeah, it's really transformational for me too.
Great. So I think it's a good place to start to give people a taste of the journey.
Wonderful. Any parting thoughts?
I think my only parting thoughts would be to treat ourselves really with compassion, because these transformation journeys it's not linear. And our cycles of transformation and of healing and of growth, they go up and down and up and down and up and down. And sometimes we think we're healed and then we go back down into the abyss and then it goes back up. And so there is an element of just giving yourself grace with it all and just trusting in the fact that you have your own timing. This story that we've been told of what good looks like is just a story. And it's about giving yourself the permission to find your own way with it. And just to not give up on that. We have one life. We have one life and we're here. It's a privilege to be here. As much as it doesn't seem that way, it's a privilege to be here and to live this life. We all come with unique skills. And in a way, it's our duty to live them out. That's the purpose. We came here to be who we are. Don't give up on that. Share my love, honestly, with anyone who is listening to this right now and who feels like they're alone and doesn't know what to do next. Just take the next small step that you can. It'll be better than staying stuck. Thank you guys so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Empowered INSEADian and that it inspired you towards greater life fulfillment and elevated consciousness.
If you have an empowering, raw, and real story to share, please get in touch with us to discuss how we could include it on the show. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, show us some love by either commenting or hitting the like, subscribe, and share buttons. It supports us more than you know.